Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Um, Something a little bit about myself. So my name is Jordan. I am a graduate assistant with the graduate school. So me alongside two other GAs, Deanna's here, Haley is not. We work to put on these events for all the grad students in collaboration with offices around campus so that you guys can have some professional development workshops and just things that you're interested on campus other than those that are already here for the undergrad students. I am a second year in the kinesiology department, and I will be graduating this year. So, congrats to everyone else who's graduating soon. Sorry. So we're planning a bunch of new things this semester. Last semester we had GRF and Red Hawk Talks. We have 3MT coming up this semester. There's a flyer in the back with details. The first preliminary round does start on the 24th, I believe, but there's a flyer with more details. So if you are interested, I advise you guys to contact the email on there as soon as possible. And then we also have next week's Professionalism 101. This talks about debt management and improving credit score. That will be on February 21st at 12 to 1:30 in Laws Hall for those that are attending in person. And for online students, if you have any questions, please contact Project Dragonfly or GradPD at miamioh.edu. But there's flyers in the back, and then there's also flyers on our site for those online students live streaming today. We wouldn't be able to do all of our programming without the collaboration of different academic and student offices around campus, like I mentioned. So we are very grateful to have Dr. Shelby Summers Ballard here today. She is the Associate Director for Academic Initiatives and Project, and also serves as a career advisor for grad students at the Center for Career Exploration and Success. I always want to call it the Career Center. So she earned her doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Hartford. Some of Shelby's focuses include the Career Center. Some of Shelby's focuses within the Career Center, sorry, I can't talk today, include job and internship, search strategies, interviewing techniques, networking resources, development and coordination of programs that help promote career enhancement. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise today, Shelby. And thank you all for coming, and thank you all, the students online, for logging in today.
All right, I think I turned my mic on. Should be good. So hi everyone, thank you for coming, and those streaming in, also thank you very much. I'm thrilled you're able to be a part of this process, even if you are not here. So my focus today is to really talk about interviewing and interviewing strategies. And then I would like to make this an open workshop, so please ask questions. If you have specific questions, it probably could benefit everyone that's here today and watching that's streaming in. So I want to just talk about some basics about interview that I think is really important for people to know, kind of building up to that first interview and what that might look like, and then talk about maybe some potential interview questions that you could expect. I think those were also posted too, so that you can refer back to them. They're really good because they're first level interview questions that are really good for you to have a bank in your head, because these are most likely what you're going to be asked when you have your first interview. So we can talk more about that. We'll go over some specific questions. I have 3 that I think are guaranteed to be asked in some version, and so just for you to start preparing for that, and we can work through the formula on how to answer those. So I just want to give you some ideas of what employers are looking for in their candidates. I want to give you some tools and some guidelines about job search and how to research employers that you're about to be interviewing for. How can you effectively market your skills to the employer? How are you doing that? What types of things are you saying? And then what is the CAR method? We'll talk about that. That's one of our formulas that we encourage students to think about as they're answering interview questions. All right, so as of 2019, the Career Center Professional Association is called NACE. So this is where we get all of our data from, industry trends, and information about employers and what they're looking for. So NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, is where we're able to pull this data from. So of all of the employers within this association, they were sent a survey about what are the top skills that you're looking for. And so here they are. So I just want to go through this. The top skill I think is really important is the communication skills. Notice that it says written. So we are in a time where we are really not having to write anymore. We are texting, we are emailing, we are Instagramming, we are doing LinkedIn, we are using other methods, not so much writing anymore. So that skill is something that employers really value, whereas they didn't used to because that's what we were doing. But now it is something that is being sought after. So written skills are incredibly valuable. Then you can take a look and see some of the other ones, which probably aren't too surprising. These are pretty consistent with what they've been lately, the last couple years. Some of them have kind of shifted in order. The ability to work in a team, you can see that's the third skill that employers most value. So more and more organizations and industries, especially startups, they're kind of not having offices anymore. They're just having these group tables where teammates from the organization are sitting together. So they expect you to be able to be a good communicator, be able to work well in a team, be able to problem solve. All of these kind of build on each other. So thinking about that, depending on the type of environment, you might not always have an office. So think about that as far as what might that look like for you. Are you comfortable with that? Can you work in a team? Do you have the ability to have that teamwork mindset? These are things that you want to start thinking about. Technical skills, that's really important. When I say technical skills, I mean Microsoft Office. I mean Excel. Are you able to make spreadsheets? Are you able to make tabs? Any type of other coding systems, R, Python, SPSS, SAS. I know I'm not even naming half of them, but those are the type of skills that we're looking for that also should be listed on either your resume or CV. So you get the email, most likely, from the employer saying, we would like to have a phone interview with you. So what are your next steps? What is it that you need to do to make sure that you are prepared for the next step in this process? So what should you be looking for going into that interview? So we encourage everyone to do research, company research, industry research, organization research, whatever it is that you're applying for, you need to do the research to be prepared. Employers want to know that you've gone above and beyond and researched a little bit about their organization so that you know a little bit about what they do. So that could be mission, that could be vision, that could be the culture of the company. So when I say culture, there's a lot of organizations that have more of a laid-back approach. That MedPace is one in Cincinnati. So MedPace is a very high-functioning organization for those of you that might know about it, but their company culture is very relaxed. You are able to wear jeans. You are able to, they have free lunches because they very much support health and wellness. There's a walking path that's outside their organization, so you're able to go out and walk when you want to get some exercise. Not every organization is like that, so you need to know, is it incredibly structured? What is the type of dress? Business professional or business casual? What does that look like? And that really should be a driving factor for you if you think that that's an organization, regardless of what it is, that you're able to be a part of that culture. Also looking for values. What do they really value within the company? What are the things that they have throughout their website? What are things that are already in the job description? That's what we're talking about when we say company research. Who are their clients? What types of services do they offer? While you're maybe have an interview with this company, you probably just have one part of that job. So it might not be specifically with clients within the company or with specific services. Maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're doing the research component of it. But you need to understand, even if that's not your area, everything that this company does, almost like a 360 view of what am I getting into and how can I speak about it in an interview. You need to understand the competitive landscape. So are there competing organizations? Are there competing industries? is that probably a conversation that might inform the way your interview goes? Most likely, because maybe they want to have ideas from you. They might present a question with you about, so what are your ideas of things that we can do to better market this product? So thinking about, gosh, you need to be able to answer that and know, well, I know the competitor might do this, this, and this, but I was really thinking I would like to do this. So just be able to speak about some of that competition. Now, again, not every organization is going to have a competitor, but you need to know, again, the more you know, the better. And take a look at the organizational structure. Most websites now will have that organizational structure, who is the leader of the office, and then what does that look like under them, and see where you might fit in. Look to see who your supervisor might be, or are you supervising people? Just know, again, where that probably will be evident in the job description, you still want to see at least the overview of the company structure. LinkedIn and Glassdoor are two incredibly valuable forums that we encourage students to do their research aside from the company website. Take a look at LinkedIn and Glassdoor. LinkedIn is really useful for you to look up other members that work at that organization. So see what their roles are, see what they're doing, take a look at their LinkedIn profile. I hear a lot of students when I tell them, you know, when they say, okay, I just got the interview list, here are all of the people in the organization that I'm meeting with. My response is, have you looked them up on LinkedIn yet? Their response usually is, no, I just feel kind of weird because they're going to see that I viewed them. That's okay. Think of it as a personal networking platform. You are trying to inform yourself of what these people's roles are and what they do, because when you interview, you want to act as if you know who they are because you've researched them. And that is completely acceptable. It's professional. It's not considered stalking. It's not considered creepy. It's something that, again, adds value to you going into this interview, that you know what you're talking about. So LinkedIn is just good for you to do a little research about people that work there. And then Glassdoor is really good because there's two things that I really like about Glassdoor. You're able to figure out the pay scale for some of these organizations. Not every job description has the scale of the salary on there. So you sometimes kind of wonder, gosh, I mean, what should I be expecting to make if I get this? So Glassdoor is a tool to help you try to hone in on what that salary range might be like. And that can be useful when it comes to negotiations. If you get that job, you will at least kind of know what the gauge is. It's also helpful if the organization is in Glassdoor, and most of them are, where you can do a search of the organization and then you can see some comments about what current people have said about it that worked there. And that's just helpful. I guess I would say take it with a grain of salt, but it's helpful to see what are some of the employees saying about this organization. All right, so a couple things as you're beginning to form your thoughts for your interview. You want to be prepared to discuss salary, but you are to not bring it up if they don't mention it. And I'll talk about why in a moment. And that's why I have here, only if the employer brings it up. But you want to know from Glassdoor what the salary range is so that you can have that in the back of your mind. So if someone can answer, why might you want to wait until the employer brings that up? Does anyone know? Ideas? Yes, I agree. It's not considered the most professional thing for you to be overzealous and mention the salary until they bring it to you. So typically what I tell students is that when they're a little nervous about that whole salary component, in most cases, you are not going to know about the salary until they offer you the position and tell you what they're offering you. So there's a lot of things that happen in between that. So you've got your phone interview, and then you most likely have your face-to-face interview. They probably still are not going to bring it up then. They are most likely going to tell you a range during the face-to-face interview, but then you're still probably not going to know where you fit into that. So that's why it's important to do your research on Glassdoor so that you can really figure out the salary. Then when they call you to offer you the position, then once they say, you know, we're able to offer you this amount, then that's when you can start your negotiations. And then that's when you need to be really dialed into the job description, the experiences, the preferred qualifications, all of that, and the company research that you've done on Glassdoor for salary. All of that should help you inform your decision on an appropriate way to negotiate back. And it's not always appropriate to negotiate salary, and those are things that I could talk with you individually about, because it depends. So, but that's usually kind of the general statement that we say. Do not bring it up until they bring it up to you. A lot of students, as you probably know from applying for jobs, that everything is online now, so you're uploading all these documents. There's usually a field that says, what is your salary expectation? If you're able to write in words and not a value, if you're able to put in negotiable, put that in. But I'm finding from students who are going through the process now, you're not even able to put that in. So you have to put in an actual number. And again, my best answer for you is to go to Glassdoor to find out the salary range. And then that's when you have to trust your gut on knowing what might be the first initial appropriate salary number to put into that field when you're applying. You also want to try to research what the compensation package looks like. Sometimes you can find it from the website. Sometimes you can find it on Glassdoor. But is it a position where you have to move? You have to move to, I don't know, I just met with a student from Arkansas. So it's a position in Arkansas and you have to move there. Will they pay for your moving costs? Will they pay for your gas? Will they give you a per diem for food when you're traveling there? What do the health benefits look like? Is there any opportunity for additional benefits? Dental, vision, what does that look like? So that's what we mean by total compensation package, because some of that might help you inform your decision if you want the job. And then cost of living. So if you accept a position in New York City, think about the cost of living. It is going to be far more than what you have here in Oxford, Ohio, or I don't know where everyone is from, but you have to think about the cost of living. So you want to know, is that salary equitable for you to live in the city that you're moving to? Are you going to be able to sustain it? So pay scale is a great cost of living calculator that can help you determine, and you're going to have to put in a couple things. It'll ask you to put in some amounts so that it can help figure out the formula for you. But that will help you see the salary that you need in order to sustain your current life that you're living now. So it's just helpful to be informed. And that could also help you when it comes to the negotiation process too. And it's very, very easy to use. So there's lots of different types of interviews. Phone interview is the most common. That's going to be usually the initial interview that you receive is probably going to be over phone. But we're seeing more and more that are now over video or Google Chat. Skype really isn't a thing anymore. Skype interviews used to be really big a couple years ago. But it's now turning into the video, the Google Chat, through some type of platform like WebEx. So Zoom is another one. So you'll know what type of interview they're asking you to do because they will tell it when they reach out to you. So interview, video interview are usually the first level types of interviews you can expect. A group interview, maybe, it really depends on the specific industry. Dining interviews, if it's a long 10-hour day, they usually will take you to lunch with the search committee or potentially dinner, depending on where it falls. There's a presentation interview, coding interview. Obviously, that's very specific depending on the industry. Same with case interview, in-person interview. Presentation interviews we're also seeing more of because not only is the number one thing that employers want is written communication, but obviously oral communication is something that is incredibly powerful too. So presentation interviews are something that they are giving you a specific topic. They're telling you how long you have to present on, and then you're going to present the information to the audience. So typically we see them in academia positions when, if anyone is interested in going into academia, depending on what your area is, let's say educational leadership, They're going to ask you to present on maybe a trend or something within that area, and you're going to present it to students, faculty, staff. So it's also in staff positions here in higher education. The Career Center, we also do that. So if you're going to come and interview to our office, we're going to ask you to present on some topics or some trends within the Career Center within a specific college, and then they're going to need to come and present on that topic. It's usually like 15 minutes, but it's just not so much about the content, it's about how they present the information, and that's what we're looking for. In-person interviews, again, that can usually be a one-on-one, maybe more of a committee, so it might be you and then 3 or 4 other people from various roles within the company or organization. The in-person interview, this here, the one-on-one, this is if you go through our mock interview process, this is what you will have, is an in-person interview, a one-to-one ratio. All right, so behavioral interviews. So this is a strategy. This is the most type of common question that you will be asked, are behavioral questions. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. But the goal of an interview, if you think about it, is just so that you can express to the potential employer what you've done in the past. You are helping to paint a picture for them about your experiences and why you are a good candidate for this position. So it all goes back to you knowing what you've done and being able to articulate that to the person that's interviewing you. Just said that, communicating your experiences. So there's 2 ways that you can prepare aside from today. This is great, a great first step for you to get a little bit of basic information. But the Career Center does offer mock interviews. I would highly encourage you all to do that. That is if you are here in Ohio. I know those of you that are streaming are not in Ohio and you're in various parts. I do have an answer for you about how you can still partake in that. But the mock interview, there are some things you have to do before you're able to do that within our office. There is a webinar called Basic Interviewing Skills. It's about 45 to 50 minutes. If you go on our website, there's a little drop down that says attend a program, and then there'll be a box for basic interviewing skills. We offer those face-to-face or webinar version, and it's going to essentially give you more of an overview of what I provided you today. So usually a step more than what I'm talking about today. It's going to give you good guidelines going into the mock interview. So you have to accomplish that first, then you can go ahead on Handshake and set up a mock interview. For those of you that don't want to, because you would rather do this virtually, or if you're unable to because you're in a different state, you can use Big Interview. That's our online platform. We just purchased this about 1.5 years ago, so it is still pretty new. Not a lot of students know about it, but it's the same thing. It gives you the opportunity to present yourself in an interview setting and then receive feedback. So again, it is virtual, and you can also sign up for Big Interview through our website. Both will give you an experience of what a potential interview will look like. So the CAR method, this is our formula for you to answer those behavioral-based questions. So CAR, context, action, result. That's how you want your questions, that's how you want your answers to come across by using the CAR method. So you want to think about the context. You want to essentially set the stage for the employer. You want to give them the examples of the who, what, where, when, why, if that is applicable. Now you want to give them the story. What was the action? What is it you did? You addressed a coworker, and how did you do it? You confronted a peer who wasn't doing what they should have been doing, and then you had a conversation about it. What is the story behind that? What did you do? And then what was the result? What happened? Then we were able to work together to figure out another plan so that we both could hand in our paper to the professor as one common unit, and we were able to work past our differences. That would be a result. You're not always going to know the result. I met with a student the other day. She's a master's, getting ready to graduate in environmental science, and we were going through this on her resume to make sure that her bullet points had this formula, the context, action, result. And there were some things that she created in her internship at Mercy Health. She's in the sustainability area, and she had created a sustainability plan within a particular unit within the hospital, and she completed it and then handed it in and wasn't sure, because she's now no longer there, if they actually enacted the plan. So in that instance, we talked about it, and I said, well, you're not going to know. I mean, I guess you could call, but then there's really not a need. So you're not always going to have a result, whether it's in your bullet point or in the answer that you give to an employer in an interview. So one of the questions that you can almost guarantee that you are going to get in the interview setting is, so tell me about yourself. It might come across in different ways or different iterations, but generally at most basic, the question is, tell me about yourself. And so students typically get really concerned because they don't know how to answer it, they don't know how long it should be, they don't know what they should include in it, and all of that I completely understand, because this is one of the harder ones, and this is my top 3 of ones that it's important for you to prepare yourself for, because you just don't know what to say. So I will say, typically 30 seconds to 1 minute is about how long you're able to go with that question. So here we call it the Miami Hello. So that's the tell me about yourself question. So you want to include obviously what your name is. Something interesting that will help the employer remember you. So is it a tagline? Is it just something special about yourself? So I'll give you 2 examples, one for me and then one from a student. I'll start this with the student first because I love hers. So her last name is Early. So she has this whole theme. She's in a creative field, so she has a creative resume. She's able to have a little bit more color within her documents, but her last name is Early. So she's created a logo with her initials and then a tiny little bird that sits on top of the logo. And do you know what it is? You're smiling. Yes! The early bird gets the worm, and I just love that. Now, it might not always be that creative, but I just think that that's something that I'm always going to remember if I were the employer. The early bird catches the worm. I think it's creative. I think it's memorable. I probably would hire her. So think about something that's specific to yourself that is memorable. So that is hers. The early bird catches the worm. I tell people, I'm from Hershey, Pennsylvania, Chocolate Town, USA. It's where all the chocolate's made. That's pretty memorable. A lot of people know about it or have been there, or can picture the smell of the Hershey's chocolate that permeates in the town. So that's something that is my thing that can be pretty memorable. So think about what yours might be. And I'm not saying that you have to follow this exact example, but this is what we train our students in conversations with our employers of what they're looking for. So your name, something memorable. Are you getting ready to graduate? What is your degree? Are you obtaining a master's degree in biochemistry and you are looking now for positions in industry? Are you a PhD, math and stats, who is now looking for economist positions? Are you, what is your background? What are your degrees and what are you looking for? It's important to be transparent to the employer. You also want to talk about some skills, like top 2 or 3 skills you have that you are going to offer this employer. Now you can get really crafty and make sure that it matches up with the job description, but then that also kind of requires you to really change your tell me about yourself question every time. So we tell students, so you're not doing that, to just try to come up with a general tell me about yourself question, and then you can adjust and change if needed. And then you want to tell the employer why you're such a good fit for this particular position. Then you usually want to end it with, I'm so excited that I have the opportunity today to talk to you about this position. Then you could say, I'm so excited to have the opportunity today to talk to you about this position. and learn more about the roles and responsibilities within this area, within this environment, within this particular office. So then you kind of circle it back to the employer. So this isn't something that you can just create 10 minutes before your interview. This takes time. I have some students who include their teaching or research interests, their dissertation title, their capstone project. I know each master's degree is different, that not everyone has a thesis. So some of them will talk specifics about their capstone or their group project or whatever they need to do. So that's something you can also do. And that also, too, I think is something that could be memorable, too. So about 30 seconds to a minute usually ends up being a pretty lengthy paragraph. So that's kind of what you're looking at. And then you want to memorize it. But you don't want to memorize it to the point where it seems as if you're reading it off of a paper. You want it to seem natural and organic. So it should really help you, by writing it down, help give you prompts of things you want to include in the Tell Me About Yourself question. So we went over the CAR method, context, action, result. That is a behavioral-based question, and I have some examples to share with you in a little bit. But then there's also the open-ended questions, which also usually it's like a half and half behavioral questions, half open-ended questions. So the open-ended questions, here's one. Identify one of your strengths and one of your weaknesses. That's what we consider an open-ended question, because now you're going to tell them what they are. What are you most interested within this job responsibility? What are you most interested in? That's an open-ended question. Why do you think you're a good fit for this role? That's an open-ended question. So think about how that differs then. So tell me about a time when you confronted a peer that you saw was doing something they shouldn't have. Tell me about a time when you confronted a supervisor whom you weren't working well with. Those are the behavioral-based questions. Try to think of a word bank in your head. And this could also be applicable to your resume or your CV. But 5 words that describe strengths that you know that you have. I could stand here and I could tell you, I know that I'm organized. I know that I am efficient. I know that I'm creative. I know that I'm respectful. I know that I'm a really good communicator. Those are just 5 things I know that I'm really good at. Then think about 5 weaknesses that you know you have. I'm not going to tell you mine, but think about them, because employers want to know that you know what your weaknesses are. And that's kind of hard. That's a tough one to think about. But they're looking for things like, is a weakness maybe time management? Is a weakness maybe you're really rigid and really structured and you like things done a certain way? And we'll talk about that question and how to answer it. But just have the back of your mind, what are 5 weaknesses of yours? What are 5 words that describe strengths that others know that you have? So you perceive yourself one way, but others might perceive you differently. So ask your peers, ask your coworkers, like, what do you think my strengths are? And then ask them, what do you think my weaknesses are? So it's hard to memorize 20 words, but just at least engage in that conversation so that you can see how others perceive you. Because one of the questions that you might get in an interview, and one that our office does, is if your coworker were sitting next to you here today, what would they say about you? That is an actual question. If your current supervisor were sitting here with us today, what would they say your weaknesses are? So it's important to know they're trying to gauge that you know how others perceive you. So these are all things that you want to make sure that you kind of have a conversation with yourself about before going into the interview. Interviews are very nerve-wracking. They're stressful. They're a source of anxiety. Your hands might shake. They might be sweaty. It is a scary thing. It probably isn't something that you're super just really ready and feeling great about, because there are nerves that come into it. So you've got to kind of think about that and accept that you're probably going to be nervous, but then you need to be able to flip it on when the actual time comes. So these are things that can help you perhaps start to get in that mindset of really then being excited about the interview, not being so nervous and that you're afraid you're gonna stumble or mess up a question. Preparation is obviously a huge part of that, which is why I'm pushing the mock interview. But know these questions ahead of time. So when does your interview start? So if it starts at 10:30 a.m., you probably want to be pulling into the parking lot between 10 and 10:10. Then you can sit in the car, you're already there, you can review some of the questions that you feel like you might get asked, and then you can just kind of take a second, maybe eat a quick snack, and then you can head in. We say 15 minutes is a good general idea of how early to arrive. 10 minutes is acceptable too, and then they will just ask you to wait until they're ready for you. But it shows that you attention to detail, it shows that you're timely, it shows that you're taking things seriously. These are all things that employers are rating you on as soon as you arrive. We have some employers who interview our students here on campus that come into our office, usually around career fair time, which we just had on Wednesday. And typically employers will kind of extend that time here and they will interview students in our office. We have several employers that I can think of right now that if a student is late to that interview, it's canceled. We no longer are wanting to interview you for this process. So not all are that strict, but there are some that are. So you want to make sure that you are early. You want to listen to each question. This isn't like a race of like how quick can you answer the question as soon as they ask you. It comes across as hasty. It comes across as you're not being thoughtful in your answer. So when someone asks you that behavioral-based question, tell me about a time when, you want to sit and take a second and form your thoughts in your head first before you spew them out to the employer. You want to make sure that you're presenting it as if you've actually taken a second to think about it. Nonverbal communication is something, again, that a mock interview will help you because you're being recorded during that interview. So some people, when they're talking, use their hands. Some play with their hair and they don't realize it. If they have a pen in their hand, they're hitting it on the table. So those are things you want to be aware of. Sometimes you can't prevent it. It's just kind of what we do. But it's helpful to be mindful that, gosh, in this mock interview, I did not realize that I was using my hands so much. That was incredibly distracting. So then think about how that might be perceived to the employer. They're probably like watching your hands like, oh my gosh. So it's just good to know how you're presenting in an interview setting. And I'm not saying that using your hands is a bad thing. You can see that I'm using mine. But it's just important to know that if that's something you do you maybe need to sit with your hands folded in your lap? You need to sit with them on the table and have them folded. It's just good if you feel as though it comes across as distracting, know what you need to do to alleviate that. Silence is not a bad thing. Again, it goes back to the listen to each question. When you're asked a question, take a second to be thoughtful about the answer. Silence isn't bad. It doesn't mean that you're not prepared. It doesn't mean that you're not ready. Silence is okay in an interview setting. You want to be honest and authentic. You don't want to come across as anything but. So it's important to always be honest with your answers, giving honest scenarios. If it's a behavioral-based question, being honest when they ask you what your strengths and weaknesses are. You want to be as authentic as you can. You want to be positive about your past experiences. So if they ask you tell me about your last role and why you're looking to leave it, you do not want to say, my supervisor was a nightmare and I have to get out of there. You might want to say that, but you really shouldn't, because it comes across as unprofessional. It comes across that you just aren't able to manage things. What if it's your fault that things are bad? You just never know what they might think. So you can maybe say something like, I've been able to learn a lot from this current role, but I'm ready now for the next step because this one has pieces that I have not yet had the experience yet to do, but I know that I can do them. So I'm really looking to move on. You don't even need to say anything about your supervisor, but you don't want to talk negative about that past experience. So then the follow-up. So this is one of the things that employers tell us. They give us feedback. This is one of the things that they say. Students are not following up after the interview and thanking them for their time. That is something that's really important and that really matters. We are now in a time where it's so much easier that we can just send an email. Years and years and years ago, it used to be that you needed to send them a handwritten thank you note. Now it's just an email, so it should be immediate. 24 hours is typically the standard from the time that your interview ends, but I would say if your interview ends early enough in the day to 2 or 3 o'clock, by the time you go to bed, you should have sent that email. And again, it just shows that you're appreciative of the time. It gives you another way to express your sincere interest in the position. It gives you a way to say, I really enjoyed talking more about the work that I'll be doing, and maybe give like a specific thing. And it just shows that you took the time and that you care, and that really matters, especially when you're applying for a job. So thank you emails are completely appropriate. Then afterwards, you want to evaluate your performance. So you want to think through the day, like, gosh, what were the interview questions that I really feel like I need to work on? What were the interview questions that I really feel like I flubbed, but I was able to recover? And then those are just things that you need to practice. I will say it until the day that I die. I think interviewing is an art, and it's difficult. It is very hard. So the more you do it, the better prepared you'll feel, and the better prepared you just are at doing it, so that it just becomes this thing that you need to prepare for that's incredibly important, but you might not obsess about it as much. So the more you do it, the more you'll build your confidence in knowing how to articulate your skills and your experiences. And you'll know kind of the questions that they're going to ask you. This is just an example of the template. Follow us on social media. We offer a ton of events, programs, opportunities. So now in our 15 minutes remaining, I want to go over some interview questions. So what I did here is I compiled a list of common interview questions that you're most likely to be asked in some way. And then I compiled a list of non-traditional questions that I wouldn't say that you need to really prepare for, but more and more organizations are asking these non-traditional questions. And so the point of it is, again, do you really know how many pennies it's going to take to fill up a room? Of course not. Like, I don't know. But they're looking for your thought process on how you're answering it. They're looking to see if you're calm under pressure, how your composure is, and if you're confident in the answer. So whatever it is that you say, they just want to hear why you're saying it, like thinking through that. So it would be something like, well, I guess I would think about how large the room is, and then I would think about the jar that I have in my house of all of the pennies, and that's about this big. So then I would probably line it up, and I would maybe just guess, and then just throw out a number. But they're just looking to hear your rationale and your thought process. Then there's some, I don't want to spend a ton of time on the non-traditional ones. There's some, one of my friends in another industry told me that they asked the question, if you were a part on a bicycle, what part of the bicycle would you be? So I don't know. And I was in a theater class the other day doing this same presentation, and one of the theater students, so more creative field, right? She said, I would be the cute basket on the front. And I thought that was really creative. But that might not work for you. You've got to feel your audience and see if that's something that you think would be appropriate to answer. I thought that was great. But then I asked the professor in the class, and I said, what would you be? And he said, I would be the spoke on the front wheel, because I feel like the spokes on the wheel really do the most work in pivoting. But that was a great answer. So I think it's just worth you reading through. And I think it's just worth you thinking about for a minute, what would be my strategy if I was asked one of those questions? Certain fields are known to do that. Student affairs is a field where they're going to ask you that. Other areas within higher education, Our office does not ask this, but areas that work with students a lot, so maybe academic advising, because you never know what type of question a student might ask you. So that's just kind of preparing you for what your response might be. I know startups do this because they're looking for creative, innovative thinkers, but we're hearing more and more organizations are doing it. So just something for you to look through. Some of them are kind of funny. Some of them are serious, like what was the last gift you gave someone? But definitely just take a look through them. Then these are the common interview questions. So these are typically what you're going to be asked in those first level interviews. So we already talked through the tell me about yourself question. That's definitely going to come at you in some way. Then the other two, because I said I had three, I listed as 1 and 2. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? I think those are incredibly hard to answer because for your strengths, you don't want to come off as like super confident, but you want to come off as confident. And then the weaknesses, well, you don't really want them to know that you have weaknesses, but obviously you do. So how are you going to convey that? Because we all have weaknesses. So it's almost with the strengths, one of the best ways that I've found is the most honest and authentic is if you maybe list 1 or 2 of your strengths and then give a reason as to why you feel that that's your strength. So think about it in more of that behavioral-based question. You're providing a specific example. Think about that for the strengths question. 1 or 2 of your strengths, and then why are you saying that about yourself? Because if you just sit there and say, well, I'm a good communicator, I'm a multitasker, and I'm really organized, I would sit there and be like, okay, like that's it? What else? So you need to give me an example as to why you are doing those, why those are your 3 strengths. And it doesn't need to be this long droned on example, but just something short and sweet to help me see why you said those 3 things. The weaknesses, that might involve a little bit more thought, but you want to state what your weaknesses are. Please don't ever say, I have none. We all have weaknesses. And don't say the classic one, well, I'm a perfectionist. And so because of that, I really sit and take time to make sure everything is perfect so that I can hand it in on time and it's exactly what my boss asked. That's a completely canned question. That is one of the most common ones, so don't answer that. Be authentic. So really actually state what your weaknesses are. So mine, the one that I use and the one that is true, is I'm very regimented and very structured and I like things done in a particular order. I have lists in my office, I have post-it notes, I have in my mind when I'm driving to work what I'm going to accomplish that day. That is not really realistic because there's things that are thrown at me in the work that I do that I didn't plan on doing, and then that in my mind can mess me up. So I'm working on being a little bit more laid back and understanding that things do happen and you need to be able to pivot quickly, and that's something that has taught me to just sit back and understand things happen and you've got to recover. So do you see what I did is I stated I know what my weaknesses are, but then I gave an example of what I'm doing to flip the conversation of I know about it and here's what I'm really actually working on. And that is the best way to answer that because it's showing self-awareness and that then you're actively doing something to fix it or to work on it. It might not be a fix. I don't think that'll ever be fixed, but it's something that I'm mindful of. So tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Those are definitely my top 3. Another one, if you go to 16, why should we hire you? That goes back to the company research. They want to know that you know about their organization and they want to know that you know why you're a good fit. So obviously they have your resume, they have the cover letter in front of them, they've probably all reviewed it, but now you need to articulate to them in person, not through your documents, about why they should hire you. So that's when it's important to throw in things from the job description. That's when it's important to throw in things from the company website or from Glassdoor, LinkedIn, whatever you did your research on, so that they really know that you have put in the work of knowing why they should hire you. Some other ones, that I would say you probably could expect. What are some of your leadership experiences? Tell us a time when you took charge of a project or a scenario. Employers like when people exhibit qualities of leadership. So maybe think through that. And it's good to be able to give very specific experiences. So that could be from a club or organization. It could be from a group project. It could be in your research team, whatever it is, it can be a specific example. They want to know your career goals. So what's your plan? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Sometimes it's like 3 to 5 years. Sometimes it's 5 to 10. So they just kind of want to know that you're forward thinking and that you're able to sort of picture what you might be doing in 5 years. That could be I'm looking to go back to graduate school. That could be I'd like to eventually own my own company. I'd like to be a consultant, whatever that is. They just want to know that you have something and that you've given thought to it. Then the rest are kind of a mixed bag. It really just depends. Usually phone interviews are about 30 minutes. So you figure probably 5 questions maybe is what you're going to be asked. And then if you are able to, if you make it to the next step when it's most likely a face-to-face interview in some way, then they're going to have more time to ask you more of these questions. So I think no matter what, it will be helpful for you to plan or at least have answers about how you would answer this. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. That's a good one. They want to know that you're taking ownership for it, that you acknowledge that you made a mistake. And then usually, at least in our office, we usually end with, so tell us what are some of your interests outside of work. That's something that we ask. Other places might ask what are your hobbies, but they want to know that you're, a real person and that you have other interests outside of work because we all should. So what does that look like for you? Are you an avid reader and you're currently reading a specific book? Are you an avid hiker and you love to be outside when you can and when you're not working? What is it that you like to do for fun? What is something that gives you energy outside of work? So I also think it's worth spending a little more time on the common interview questions than the non-traditional questions, but going through each of these or having someone ask them to you. This will also prepare you for the mock interview because these are the standard questions that you'll be asked in that hour mock interview. So it's just good prep and practice work because remember, it takes time. Interviewing is, like I said, an art. And so the more you practice, the better you are. So don't be afraid to ask yourself these questions. Say it in the mirror, say it in the shower, say whatever works for you. But you want to start getting down your responses so that you can come across as being confident and that you know about yourself. Because this interview is all about you. You are talking about yourself the whole time. So you have to be confident in being able to talk about yourself. So does anyone have any questions as we finish up? Yes. Ah, okay. That's great. So, yeah, 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 right, right. That's a great perspective. So just to make sure everyone heard that, so in the job description and in the interview, he was asked, in the job description it said you must have a sense of humor, and then he was asked about his sense of humor in his interview. I think that's great. So yeah, that could throw you off if you're not sure how to answer it. So again, you want to be authentic. And so maybe something that you could say is, I view myself as I have to think through this because it caught me off guard too. I view myself generally, in most aspects, as very serious. However, I do enjoy when I hear a coworker or when a friend or someone tells me a joke or wants to have a conversation outside of the scope of my work. I always enjoy that. So my sense of humor is getting that energy from others and engaging or hearing jokes or whatever that is. That's something that, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to say that you want to acknowledge you're serious, because if that's what your overall, if that's usually the overall energy that you put out, you want to acknowledge that. But then you also want to showcase that even if maybe you don't think you're the funniest person, you enjoy being around others that have a sense of humor. So you are not opposed to having conversations with coworkers at lunch about funny topics, or listen to this embarrassing story that just happened to me. And that probably brings out more of your sense of humor, of feeling more connected to people, more energy, then you're more apt to engage in a conversation like that. I think that might be maybe my, I'd have to think through that a little more, but that's probably like things I would maybe think to add in. But that's good. That's really good. Yes. 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 Great. So at the end of the interview, typically they're going to say, so what questions do you have for us? So usually I say have like 3 to 5 questions already written down on your Padfolio that you're going to take into the interview, and already have them written down. And those questions should be varying topics about the organizational structure, maybe about the what do you like best about working here? Are there opportunities for professional development? Is there any type of tuition remission package if you're interested in continuing grad school? What would it look? What would you expect within the first 30 days of my employment that I should accomplish? I mean, and honestly, you could Google these and you would get tons of really good answers about what you should ask employers. What do you look for in your supervisees? If your supervisor is sitting in the room, what are you looking for? Those are some general questions. Some of those questions might get answered throughout the interview process. So that's why I usually say to have 5. Like if you go in with 2, and like let's say one of them is already answered, and then you just have one answer or one question to ask, it just kind of is like, why weren't you more prepared? I've been in interviews before when we ask the candidate, so what questions do you have for us? And they say, I don't have any. I think I'm all set. No, 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 no. You don't want to do that, because it, again, shows that you didn't take time in preparing. You weren't thoughtful about questions that you might really want to ask them, so that it can give you a better idea of what it's like to work in that organization. So don't ever say you don't have any questions. And if you don't have any questions, find some questions. And like I said, Google's a really good tool for that. So good questions too, those can be formed from the job description. You can pull out. So I saw here one of the responsibilities is evaluating student workers and classified staff. Can you tell me how many that might be and what that evaluation process looks like? Be a good one. So you can pull out questions from the job description. Go ahead. Yeah. 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 That is tough. So when personal questions are asked, that shouldn't be. And this particular question was about maternity leave and if she expected to be going on maternity leave. That is illegal, actually. So you are not obligated to answer that question. It's disappointing to hear that that's still happening, because typically educational institutions, I know here, when you're getting ready to convene a search committee, you have to go through a training about these are the questions that are appropriate, these are the questions you should not ask. And if you do, there's a lot of ramifications that happen. So typically, marital status should not be asked. Sexual orientation should not be asked. Children, dependents should not be asked. Again, those are illegal. So how did you answer that question? Okay, just like that. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really tough one. I guess for me, I would think, gosh, if they're already asking those invasive questions to me, I don't think I want to work here. I don't think I feel comfortable in this environment. And I know that sometimes we can't be picky about that, but I think when it comes to that, if they're on the interview asking me those questions, do you and your husband plan on having kids? Say, I would be like, I don't want to work here. And yeah, so you could say, I just really don't feel comfortable answering that. Like you could just frame it like that. I think you answering it directly, I think that's okay. But you shouldn't ever feel uncomfortable answering a question. And if you do, it's probably illegal that when they're asking a question like that. So that is a tough one to navigate. But I think you kind of just have to think quickly of like, could I see myself working here? Because it's as much as it is an interview for them to interview you, you're interviewing them as well. And if it's a place that you don't feel comfortable in, it's probably a place you don't want to work at. So I think it sounds like you did a great job answering it directly, but those were illegal questions. Yeah. Was this all within the same organization? Yeah. 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 So, I mean, typically, if a position that you're applying for is asking for a list of references, you can assume that they're going to be probably contacting the references. There have been times that I have heard that references aren't contacted because they had such a great interview with that person. They felt like they had a really good experience and that they know now what they're getting, and they're waiting for the background check. So usually the background check, which most companies and organizations do, they'll just kind of use that as the reference. Um, I don't really have an answer as far as why some contact, why some don't, but generally you can always assume they're going to contact them. But I don't know why this particular place didn't contact. Yep, correct. It's so hard to say. There's so many moving parts to that process of hiring for employment. It could have been maybe they had an internal candidate and they just opened up the pool because they had to get a certain amount of people to apply for it. And then they ended up, as soon as the interviews were closed, they then hired the internal candidate. The rest of the candidates that interviewed, they flipped to no longer considering or whatever. Like there's just so many different things that could be happening. I just can't really give you a specific answer. Um, of what, searching social media? It is. It is, and unfortunately, there is no one answer to give you. We do know employers do look through LinkedIn. They try to find other social media presence that you might have. So they are Googling your name in most cases, looking to see what is out there about you. If you have not Googled your name, I would encourage you to Google your name. It's just helpful to know what might come up. So for me, when I Google my name, my LinkedIn profile comes up, and then other initiatives that I've worked on through our office, if they've been written about or in a news article, then you'll usually see those. If you do have Instagram or Facebook, I would encourage you when you're job searching to make it private, or make sure that it's completely acceptable and appropriate. So I can't really give you specific answers about that because each hiring process is so different. But we can definitely talk more about it individually too, and we can come up with some other scenarios. All right, well, if you have any additional questions, definitely please feel free to reach out to me. Summers4 is my email, summers4@miamioh.edu. You can also schedule an appointment with me for individual career advising through Handshake, which is our online platform for job searching and scheduling appointments. All right, thank you everyone for your time.